So now that we covered the basics, we will start with the very first sign of the zodiac, which of course is not really correct because a circle does not have a beginning nor an end. So that's why we take Mother Nature as our point of reference when spring starts at the spring equinox, usually on 23rd of March, as I mentioned before. That's when the sun goes into Aries for us Western astrologers using the tropical zodiac. And Aries, therefore, is the very beginning. But before we get into that, we should have just a little glimpse into that what is before the beginning. Meaning, everything comes from the nothingness. Everything before it manifests in any way of form, it is already there, but as I mentioned before, in the ether, in the non-manifested form, in the all being but not in a form. Because basically when something starts to form in something separate, which is an archetype of Aries, the moment it forms, it is separate from the whole. So it is always good to know that that sign that gives birth to the new beginning and to Aries is the 12th house, or the 12th sign is Pisces, which we can translate into the divine consciousness, the that what is without a form, the non-existing existence, the formless being, the time and spaceless. That is something that we can basically not describe in words, but it is a consciousness. A God experience is not praying to an outer entity, because that is still based on the belief of separation. But the God experience, the divine experience, is an experience beyond words, beyond time and space. It is basically an experience of a pure revelation that leaves you in just a state of 3 letters. Ah, that's all you have afterwards. So from that non-existent existence that has no shape, no form, out of that nothingness, the preparation of the last weeks of winter, when the sun is going through the sign of Pisces, where it seems, especially in countries like Canada or Germany, like northern countries, we all have the feeling we're so sick of winter. We have the feeling that, it's enough. But it seems as if nothing is moving. Nature is just dead asleep. And yet, while nothing is happening, Pisces, purest archetype of Pisces, the preparation of the new birth, of the new cycle, is already in process, but not in a visible or measurable form. So before Aries or something new is given birth to, there is already the state of oneness, similar to a baby in the mother's womb. After the conception, given the fact that consciousness would be in there already, don't want to get into that, but the moment when the consciousness of the so-called soul, that part of the self that believes that it is separate from the self, there's only one self, that part, when it finds itself in the womb of the mother, perceives sensually or energetically that womb like an endless, warm, moist, nurturing balloon of time and spacelessness. So basically the prenatal, time before birth, for an embryo is the 12th house, or as an archetype, the 12th sign, i.e. Pisces. Or the astral world is also the 12th house, or the 12th sign, Pisces. Many spiritual or esoteric people mix up the astral world with heaven, but that is not true. The astral world is the dual opposite to the worldly world, but it's not heaven. Because in heaven there is no opposite, there is just one. So, but we cannot describe it, we can only experience it. So every religious dogma is basically a lie, it's just wrong. But the experience of oneness, which means in the same moment of not having any definition of I, of separation, is the Piscean archetype. And I love to start Aries with first helping us to remind that we are coming from the same Piscean oneness, that we all had the in-between state in the mother's womb. And then at one point, this huge universe of the mother's womb, from the point of view of the embryo, is basically shrinking as the baby's body is like growing. And shortly before birth and the labors kick in, it feels as if heaven is pushing us out, even though we're not in heaven, we're in astral world. That is one reason why there is this biblical story, which is interesting, put it this way, that Adam was thrown out of the paradise, because that is basically the experience of the Aries archetype. And I'll get to that in a minute. So now we start really with Aries. So if you do the index card, which I highly recommend, you want to write on the headline, Aries, Mars, first house / ascendant. And as a reminder for you to always be able to expand your understanding of archetypes, I would also recommend that you write underneath that Aries is fire, it is the quality of cardinal, and it is yang. That should be your sub-headline. And out of that nothingness, that existing nothingness, something brand new. Archetype brand new. It is brand new. Meaning it is so absolutely new that we do not have a concept. We have no point of reference for that very moment of the brand new, because it is so brand new. Right? And because it is brand new, as we learned about the signs, the qualities of cardinal, it is simultaneously carrying a certain form of inherent insecurity. And that insecurity is even on a quite high tension / stress. I mean, we have many forms of stress. We can have emotional stress, mental stress, but here we have like an instinctual stress, the stress of separation. Because, I mean, there is a reason why when babies are born and they enter this world, they cry, right? There's no baby coming and smiling, saying, hey, great, I'm here again, right? So there is a reason. Just open the eyes. This is not a happy place. Anyway. So the sense of separation, with like being pushed out of that oneness of this motherly womb, that eternal nurturing experience, suddenly triggers a sense of separation, finding itself more or less like as a separate entity from the nurturing source, which for the fetus is and was the mother's womb. So, sorry if I'm skipping a little bit into a more spiritual thing. So basically, every time we're born, that part of the soul that thinks that it is separate from the self, i.e. the one, is re-experiencing the dream, the error dream of being separate of God. And therefore, tremendous anger or fear might trigger the physical system. And then if we have like religious cultures like, you know, the Judaistic Christian culture, that we or our forefathers must have done something wrong, and therefore we were thrown out by God out of the paradise, i.e. heaven, as a form of punishment, we now need to somehow deal alone with that whole kind of like whatever it is, right? It is interesting because we learned a little bit about aspects. The sign of Aries, which is cardinal, the beginning of the spring, forms a natural square, right angle, to the winter sign, cardinal of Capricorn. And Capricorn is the father, is the authority, is the boss, right? And it can, because it has many archetypes, we will hear them, it has also something to do with rules and regulations, with the law, right? So that stress, the square from Aries to Capricorn, relative to the sense of separation and that rush of adrenaline, adrenaline is Aries archetype, adrenaline, is then triggers, at least for sure, like when there's a cultural and religious imprint later in life, a belief, which has the word lie in it, that we were punished by the boss, i.e. God, because we must have done something wrong, right? And now that we're on our own, we cannot rely on this womb, i.e. heaven, that has kicked us out, and therefore we are on our own. We are alone, not in terms of lonely, but I am here and you are the others. Separation. Make sense? So basically, if you look at the world, the whole world runs on that trauma of the belief of being kicked out by the boss, i.e. God, for something we must have done wrong, and the fear of punishment, which is more a Capricorn archetype, but it ties into the Aries, makes us run away, right? When we were kids and we screwed something up, right? And we got busted, we would run. We're not standing, I'm sorry, right? We would run. It's the instinct. So Aries basically within itself, coming back to the astrology, not the spiritual thing, Aries within itself is the archetype of new beginning, the sense of separation. I'm sometimes repeating the things because it's better to hear words a couple times. And due to the stress of separation, there's an inherent fear of insecurity, which, because Aries being a Yang and Aries sign, triggers the instinctive, Aries being instincts, the instinctive need for a Yang fire, right? I'm Aries rising, like my physical body is Aries rising. When I see a traffic light, dark green into orange reddish, my instincts goes, there's no need for that, right? A Capricorn rising would probably stop to be safe, right? So there is the instinct of just wanting to go forward. And that's what Aries really holds. It is full of energy of starting something brand new without a concept. Aries within itself has no concept. And please don't mistake me, it does not mean that Aries, an Aries-born person, would be an aloof person who has never a concept. It's the archetype. We're looking at the essence. Yeah. And because of the sense of separation and that strong drive via the impulses and instincts come from our brain stem, from our primarily brain, which is also Aries. Yeah, in cooperation with Cancer. So it's just our instincts. And that strong drive, on the run, being separate now, having a kind of a sense, stress, or even anger, Aries, anger, about that womb / nurturing heavenly place that pushed us into a cold world. And as we said, the stress of a square makes that Aries engine go on, and there's energy, active physical energy, instinctive energy, impulsive energy. That stress to the womb is also seen by the square to the sign of the summer, first sign of summer, also cardinal, which is Cancer. So there is a certain anger of being kicked out, and okay, I'm gonna do it on my own. That's the kind of with a very strong physical instinct from the primary brain, right? Focusing on one's instinctive desires. So Aries is the archetype of instinctive desires. Well, more or less luckily, due to the square to Capricorn, we learn through conditioning, through our parents. Parents, the mother is Cancer, or fourth house, but now I'm talking in sign language, not sign language, like in signs. And father would be Capricorn. In Germany, we call the state father state. So every state, every culture has its own rules and regulations of right and wrong, which is Capricorn, right? But these are all man-made laws. They are not universal laws. And most man-made worldly laws have nothing to do with the real law. Just like that. But going back to our instincts, like let's say a very strong testosterone-driven man, testosterone is of course an Aries hormone, testosterone, right, the male hormone, would go to a supermarket and would see a lady that triggers all his brainstem instincts, right? Which include, of course, also brainstem is also, the responsible part for our sexual instincts. So Aries, first house Mars, is the ruler of our sexual instincts. And let's say this young man, full of testosterone, eventually coming from the gym, having even more testosterone and a little bit of adrenaline, which is also Aries, would see that whatever he's triggered by, this blonde girl, his instincts would, without a consent, probably just want to run over, grab her by the hair, pull her in the cage, and let's just do what nature tells him to do, right? But because of social conditioning, square to Capricorn, that will be probably in a stressful way, he will hopefully learn to not listen to the instincts. But now it depends on what kind of society we grew up in. How a society deals with those instincts. Are they, for whatever cultural, historical reasons, more suppressed? What Capricorn has a tendency to. I can suppress like that. Or I can be a good leader. It always depends on my beliefs. Beliefs is Sagittarius. So if we have like a person that has, independent from the chart, grows up in a society or in a status quo of the society, let's say like upper class, where you have to behave in a certain kind of way, it's more likely that the instincts were suppressed. That means, more or less in our Western society, relative to our history of church dogma, right? We have societies, they might have little diversities, but where we have learned that all of our physical instincts need to be suppressed. Well, there is a ground rule. Everything we suppress gets distorted. We learned that with Capricorn in a dysfunctional way. But coming back to the natural archetype, basically Aries is just this kind of like, like a Harley Davidson driver after a long winter, going to his garage, pulling his machine out and going like, and just wanting to hit the road with no concept where to go, right? No concept implies that this person, the Aries archetype, would like to have, another archetype, freedom and independency. Freedom and independency for one reason, to have the space or the headspace to be able to act upon his instincts whenever they arise. If I would take my girlfriend with me on the motorbike, I might want to like speed up, but she has to go to the loo, right? That's already disturbing, right? So kind of like exaggerated way. So it is the need for absolute freedom and independency to be able to follow on one's instincts in order to make experiences via the physical body. Aries is the physical body. So the first house is therefore our birth. The sign on the first house cusp shows how the birth was. But it also shows how our physical instincts work and how our sexual instincts work. And how we follow on these instincts. Just like little hints. But each of us has every human being has a very natural emotional need for two things simultaneously that manifest in every human being as an emotional paradox. On the one hand, the Aries first house Mars archetype. of I need to be free and independent to act upon my instincts when I want, when they come, without a concept, to learn, not cognitive learning, but experience, where they lead me to when I act upon these instincts, right? That's learning, like real experience. Because if I do that, I'm able to figure out who I am. Because if I don't have a concept, if I'm just popped out of the womb into a cold world with a family that says like dootsy, 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 you might want to figure out who you really are, right? Because there's constantly this pressure from the social expectation, parents, society, gender expectation, religious expectation, career expectation. There's always expectation on this poor first house ascendant or Aries archetype. You just want to live your life, but no, you gotta go to school, those kind of things. So the need to be independent, to act upon one's instinct when they arise, to be able to figure out by experience who I am myself, because I only know one thing about myself. I am not you. We are separate. So Aries is also the archetype of separation, as described before. But in order for me to learn by acting out my instincts, or having the freedom to act out my instincts, requires simultaneously, and that's the other part of the paradox, an opposite, a other person, or the others. So in astrology we say the ascendant or the Aries is the I, and the 7th house or Libra is the world of others. Right? So me Tarzan, you Jane. Right? That's the kind of thing. So in that opposition, 180 degree, the Aries archetype that only has the strong drive to do something can now learn by acting on the instincts via the social conditioning Capricorn and the need to feel emotionally safe, square to Cancer. If I interact with person A, Libra, 7th house, or person B, how they will react to my action. Aries being archetype of instinctive action, which in most people are suppressed. By their reaction, I can experience / learn. When I say learn, I don't mean reading books. I can figure out who I am in comparison to the others. Comparison is an archetype that belongs to Libra, not to Aries. Now, Aries doesn't compare. I'm here. I'm good. I'm number one. Right? So if that need to be number one is very strong in Aries. So if you have someone who has, like, let's say the Venus in the sign of Aries or in the 1st house, the 1st house is always like Aries, this person has a very strong need, Venus is need, for independency, and when recognized, please, as the number one, nothing else. Right? So if you would go like, oh, come every Saturday, oh, stay with me, they're gone, right? If you give them all the independency, they appreciate that because they need that, because there are moments where they have no idea what they want, right? Make sense? So naturally, if the archetype of Aries is given itself or himself the space to act upon those instincts, to be independent, by using that square to Capricorn as a form of self-responsibility, which for the first, at least 12 to 18, 20 years is usually not given, right? Because we're needy, square to Cancer, we need mom, we need all that. But if, by growing up, which is Capricorn or 10th house, if we are able to have a life structure, Capricorn, that gives us the space to act out our Aries or 1st house archetype, right, in a self-responsible way, right, then this archetype is in a very constructive or functional way embedded in one's life. But most people in our society suffer from their instincts and their very instinctive nature being utterly suppressed by social expectations, by fear of judgment, by all those kind of things. So we have like lots of distorted forms of instinctive things, which then, over the run of time, affect the physical body. Yeah? Aging and disease are the results from that, right? I mean, we're all aging, right? Just as a friendly reminder that we're not the body, but that's another thing. So if Aries is able to create as a life that is full of self-responsibility, to have the time to figure out my instincts, to do the comparison thing, everything that I just described, this person will use its strength is not the right word, but it's energy, it's vroom, it's full, it's boost, in a very, very self-responsible and self-constructive way. But if not, if that person, for whatever parental or social regulation or accusation, judgments, or fear of punishments would force or be forced to suppress these instincts, the reaction from that is a dysfunctional manifestation that we call aggression. Aggression. But in my terminology, aggression, which comes from the Latin word aggredere, which means to make a step forward. It doesn't mean anything else. Aggression, aggredere means a step forward. It's very Aries archetype, right? Make a step forward. Yeah? So if I am allowed to make a step forward without anyone hindering me or judging me or punishing me, then aggression is a very constructive thing. You have the energy, you have to push to get something done, but not in a negative, aggressive way, but in a constructive, doer way. That's the natural archetype of Aries. But when someone is in the way or suppresses or there are obstacles, at one point, then Aries explodes, but in an Aries way. Meaning, Aries explosions are not unpredictable. You feel the thunderstorm coming. They done. Like thunders clean the air, done. Forgotten. 5 minutes after, don't dwell and say like, oh, you said that like a minute ago. It's gone. It was just like a little like a burp of energy. Done. No concept. Right? So behind every aggressive nature is basically a major chunk of suppression, we could say. Right? So if you look at our society, if you look at most of the movies, the sexual violence, because aggression, shifting gear higher, from aggression we have violence, physical violence, sexual violence, right? It's all the sign of there's a high degree of suppression of that what is naturally beautiful, right? Because if we're honest, we're nothing but domesticated apes, right? And our domestication was not based on natural law. So we have all these dysfunctional kind of like things. Yeah? But within itself, Aries is truly I find it a very innocent, direct, it's not going like this, mushy, straight, bold, direct, impulsive, right? But it needs the space to create or to have this energy act out physically in the first place. So if we have like a chart with a strong emphasis in Aries, and this person would be like a tax accountant that always sits like on a computer all day, it's highly recommended that we give him some, do some sometimes, let the animal out before the animal starts to dominate you in one way or the other. So that's basically everything about Aries. It's a very direct, instinctive, impulsive, and physical archetype. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
Free your mind.
Remember times without time.
Free